Collateral damage, what the Nashville shooting says about gun violence and children in the U.S. Plus, Florida under Desantis. I talk with Pulse Nightclub shooting survivor and Equality Florida Press Secretary Brandon Wolf about the state of gun violence, along with Desantis' continued attacks on marginalized communities. Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. The ripple effect of the Nashville shooting is making its way around the country. 3 children were killed, along with 3 adults. Now, experts are saying that for the second year in a row, guns are the leading cause of children's death in the United States. The CDC says in 2021, more than 4,700 children between the ages of 1 to 19 died from firearms. That's up from 9% from the year before, making it the leading cause of death for children and adolescents for that year. Firearms first surpassed motor vehicle crashes as the leading cause of death for children in 2020. In comparison, about 4,300 children died in car accidents in 2021. In 2022, there were 647 mass shootings. According to the Gun Violence Archive, almost 10,000 people have already died from gun violence in 2023. President Biden spoke to a crowd of people in Durham, North Carolina, and advocated for more gun safety and removing weapons of war from the streets.
Everybody thinks somehow the Second Amendment is absolute. You're not allowed to go out and own an automatic weapon. You're not allowed to own a machine gun. You're not allowed to own a flamethrower. You're not allowed to own so many other things. Why in God's name do we allow these weapons of war in our streets and at our schools?
President Biden told reporters that he can't do anything except plead with Congress to act reasonably. But Congress remains deadlocked over gun violence and has not passed meaningful legislation on gun safety, despite the continuing loss of life. Turning to Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is continuing his assault on LGBTQ+ and BIPOC communities. The Don't Say Gay law went into effect a year ago, and the DeSantis administration hopes to expand it, along with restricting more rights and teaching. I spoke with Equality Florida Press Secretary and Pulse Nightclub shooting survivor Brandon Wolf about the conservative attacks, fighting back as a community, and the state of gun violence given the mass shooting in Nashville. I want to touch on, your position right now is a busy one. There's a lot going around all over the country, but in Florida, that is one of the seats of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation and attacks on the queer community there. And I wonder, would you talk a little bit about the rise of book bans and this pressing back against, erasure of queer and BIPOC people? It's just flat out erasure of our histories. And would you talk about what you see in terms of examples of this already happening?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And forgive me, because we could do an entire conversation on this topic alone. But
Sure.
I really think it's important to illustrate for people that there are 2 primary groups of people at play here. On the one hand, you have these huge multi-million-dollar right-wing organizations like Moms for Liberty, the Heritage Foundation, the Alliance Defending Freedom, for whom their entire existence is to peel back progress on civil rights, whether that's for LGBTQ people, Black and brown people, or otherwise. And then on the other hand, you have cynical politicians like Ron DeSantis and others, who don't really have any solid convictions or core values. They're just, for them, cruelty is currency. They've hopped on the anti-LGBTQ train because it's the vehicle to get them where they're going. And so the marriage of those 2 groups is what has led to the surge in anti-LGBTQ legislation and hate in our state. And you asked about some examples. Everybody's familiar with the Don't Say Gay bill. Obviously, we had a ban on trans kids participating in sports pass the year before that. And as a result, we've seen sweeping book bans across the state. Florida is second only to Texas in the number of books that have been challenged and banned. We've seen classroom curriculum be censored. We just saw a principal lose her job because they dared to teach a lesson on Michelangelo's statue of David. We've seen, families question whether or not it's safe to send their kids to school in this state anymore. We've seen rainbow safe space stickers being peeled from classroom windows, school districts like Miami-Dade refusing to recognize LGBTQ History Month. And it's all birthed from this one space of right-wing organizations that have shopped horrible legislation nationwide, marrying themselves with politicians who are desperate to run for and be president in the future. And they've passed these really egregious pieces of legislation that have led to all of the book banning and censorship I mentioned.
When he expands "Don't Say Gay" or further tries to erase queer people, what does that look like nationwide? How does that ripple out in the world, the
It's
nation?
a great, yeah, it's a great question because I know it's easy to feel insulated if you're in a traditionally progressive city or state. It's
Mm,
easy to feel like, the Bugs Bunny meme of sawing Florida off and sending it out into the
right,
Atlantic Ocean. And that's cute, but that's not how politics
right.
works. Florida has become the laboratory for these right wing policies. And so, first, the major threat that's posed is that these policies get picked up and trafficked to other states. We've seen don't say gay style bills filed and passed in a number of states. We've seen the same efforts around book banning, around banning of drag shows and arts and entertainment. These things that Desantis has learned how to weaponize effectively get picked up and brought to other states and impact millions of people around the country. And the second thing that's worth noting is, again, DeSantis is driven by a desperation to be president of the United States. He got a whiff of his own supply during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, and now he's obsessed with being
Mhm.
president of the United States. And so if you're made uncomfortable by the book banning or the story about Michelangelo, imagine giving Ron DeSantis the keys to the US Department of Education. If you're made uncomfortable by the way he attacks private businesses and corporations, imagine giving him the keys to the United States economy. This is a man that can't be trusted with the levers of power because he's shown he's willing to weaponize them against the most marginalized, and he really wants to be president. So he doesn't just pose a threat here in Florida, he poses a threat around the country.
And of course, since Pulse, we're seeing more and more tragic mass shootings. And again, there's a sense of hopelessness. And as someone who's been involved with trying to combat this, where do you see it going? What do you think we need to do to try to stop these incredible gun laws?
It's heartbreaking, and my heart broke again this week as the story of another school trended on Twitter, and we saw national headlines around another school shooting. And I found it ironic actually because when I learned about the shooting in Tennessee, I was actually watching a hearing where the bill sponsors of a bill to criminalize healthcare for transgender people in our state were arguing that parents don't have a right to harm children or something in their sort of inane rationalization for their cruelty. And I thought, how ironic, how painfully ironic that we're talking about passing legislation to protect children when these same right-wing lawmakers do nothing about the number one cause of death for American children, which is firearm-related injuries. But I think it's important to say out loud that we have made progress already, despite the incredible odds against us, the very well-funded machine that is the gun lobby. We've made progress, right? In 2018, for instance, over 40 NRA-backed candidates for Congress lost their election. In 2020, we elected the President Biden, who had the most progressive gun safety platform that we'd seen from a presidential candidate in a very long time. We've made progress on these issues, and I have to believe that the next generation, that millennials and Gen Z, the generations who grew up hiding behind desks, learning active shooter drills, that they're going to be the ones to make substantive change.
Thank you so much to Brandon for stopping by. Visit eqfl.org to learn more about his work and what LGBTQ plus and BIPOC advocates are doing on the ground in the state. Happy Women's History Month. We're continuing our series by honoring an LGBTQ plus rights pioneer, and that's Miss Major Griffin Gracie. Miss Major Griffin Gracie is a Black trans activist and community leader. She played a role in the Stonewall riots in 1969 and has been fighting for LGBTQ plus rights, police reform, and social justice for over 50 years. Miss Major also worked with several HIV/AIDS organizations in San Francisco and earned the nickname Mama Major in the community. She continues her advocacy work with many intersectionalities and runs the House of Gigi, a retreat center for trans and gender nonconforming leaders leaders in Arkansas. Thank you so much for watching This Advocate today. This show and all programs on the Advocate channel are shedding light on the biggest issues of the day. Visit us online at advocatechannel.com or wherever you stream your content. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. I'll see you next time.